Veselības aprūpē, kā daudzkārt uzsvērts, svarīgākā ir darba roku pieejamība, jo cilvēku resursu trūkums, kas saistīts ar speciālistu deficītu un nozarē pastāvošo atlīdzību, noved pie sarežģījumiem nodrošināt pakalpojumus vai veido pārmērīgi garas rindas uz tiem.
Taču nemaz svarīga problēma ir arī medikamentu trūkums, ar ko palaikam saskaramies mēs Latvijā un arī visā Eiropā. Kas ir šie krīzes dziļākie iemesli un kā plānot stiprināt piegāžu drošību zālēm un arī to noturību? To vaicāsim Eiropas Veselības aprūpes izplatītāju asociācijas ģenerāldirektoram Kasperam Ernestam.
Good morning.
Good morning, labrīt. Thank
morning.
you for being with us this morning.
Thank you.
Across Europe, not just in Latvia, people struggle to get the medication, the drugs they need. Do we know the real reasons why those drugs are missing, and what is the EU actually doing to fix this problem?
Yeah, if we look at the evidence that is on the table from the national authorities across Europe, we know that more than half of the shortages are caused by manufacturing issues, delays in manufacturing, raw materials missing, and so on and so forth. So that's about global supply chains. Then we have increases in demand as a second big reason where we have not been able to forecast properly. What the EU is doing is first and foremost proposing changes to the general pharmaceutical legislation, making sure there are stronger supply obligations on manufacturers, also making sure we have prevention plans, mitigation plans in place. And then they have proposed the Critical Medicines Act, which is really looking at upstream diversification of the production, both in terms of having more production in Europe, but also in terms of making sure that we are not so reliant on a few countries like China and India, so also having production with other strategic partners.
But can this problem really be addressed and solved by change in legislation only? You mean these acts? Because it relies on many things you mentioned, including production, including demand, that cannot be just affected by legislation.
Absolutely. There are, of course, things that needs to be done in the market as well. We have seen continuous pressure on prices, which can be problematic over time if we are actually not making sure that we are willing to pay for our medications what it costs to produce them. So of course we can ourselves exacerbate, and at global level there is an increasing demand for medicines. Other parts of the world are increasingly using medicines to the same level as we are in Europe and the US, and therefore the battle to get the drugs is also increasing at a global level. So we have to follow.
Yeah, actually talking about the prices, in some countries it is a really big problem. For example, in Latvia, some drugs cost much more than in other countries. From your point of view, how big are the price gaps between bigger and smaller countries?
The price gaps can be quite significant across countries. It depends a lot on the medication. It depends on the situation. Sometimes the price is higher in Latvia. Sometimes it can be a bit lower. It differs, but overall, small countries have a difficult time negotiating as good prices as big countries, especially for lower price drugs, because you don't have the same volumes. So there are specific considerations to take when you are a smaller member state.
It's the matter of volume then?
Partially, yes, at least when we talk about the generic medicines.
But looking at the prices and availability at both those aspects, are things at the moment getting better or worse for patients in Europe, across Europe?
Yeah, what we see the last year, but it's very recent data, is that we are finally seeing a stagnation in the increase of shortages. So over the past decade, it's unfortunately gone in the wrong direction. But in the past 2 years, we see some flattening of the curve, and hopefully we will start seeing better results as we are starting to really work more in depth with this issue. As you said, it takes time. Markets need to adjust. We need to change global supply chains. It doesn't happen fast, but we do see some, hopefully, improvements on the horizon.
About global supply chains, we often hear about supply chain breakdowns, actually. How dependent are your countries on medicine imports from outside of Europe?
We are quite dependent, especially again on certain medications like the generics. We are quite important, not only of the finished product, but also, of course, of chemicals that goes into the production and active pharmaceutical ingredients. So I was very happy yesterday to visit one of your local manufacturers, and the optimism we have in Europe that we can actually bring back some of our manufacturing and that we are actually efficient and can do it in Europe. But it is a very long process, and we will never be fully independent from imports. We also would like to export, so it's a two-way situation. And therefore, we need, of course, to figure out how do we then do it so that we have security. Who are our strategic partners? How do we diversify where we get our medicines from?
If the process is long, as you mentioned, it needs to be started anyway at some point.
Yep.
So what is maybe some concrete plan to strengthen the local production of drugs?
Yeah. So what the Commission has proposed is really to set aside money for strategic projects where we start looking at manufacturing capacity in Europe. We start building factories in Europe that can satisfy our most basic needs, so addressing critical medicines, making sure we have production capacity in Europe to produce the most basic necessities. And of course, at the same time, incentivizing in public procurement the purchase of European medicines.
Patients say it's often the cheap drugs, actually, like antibiotics, that are missing. While expensive ones are still there, available. Why is it harder to cheap exactly the cheap ones, basic medicines on drugstore shelves?
Yeah, but that is because we are paying less for them, and thus the incentive to make more products is difficult. So if you need 2 boxes of medicine in each pharmacy out there on Monday morning, you need to produce a little bit more than what is actually needed, because otherwise it's not in the right place at the right time. And when it comes to more expensive medicines, there is more incentive to produce that little bit extra. But when it comes to generics, which are very low cost, we tend to run the supply chains very, very tightly. And that can sometimes lead to small disruptions here and there. So in general, we are also advocating to have more stocks on the market so that we can always, soften the blow when there are small changes in the demand.
On the other hand, there are very severely expensive medication, for instance, for oncology patients. And we had this one story recently that one patient really needs more than 700,000 euros for this portion. That's only possible thanks to donations. So is it normal that medicine can cost such a price? So what makes it up?
It's, let's say, normal. No, most medications do not cost that, but it is the research cost. And as we start advancing the big blockbuster diseases, so to say, as it's called in our language, you have treatment for that. So now we are starting to develop treatments for very rare diseases. You have very few patients, but the research and development to develop those drugs still cost the same amount of money. And so, yes, we are seeing that drugs are becoming more and more expensive because otherwise you cannot recuperate the research and investment. And that is a dilemma that every healthcare system in every country around the world is facing at the moment. How do we actually afford this? How do we tackle that? And so far, a lot of the response has been to say we want to give access, and so we try to decrease the price of other drugs. And this is where we have maybe come to a difficult situation now, that we have pushed down the price of certain drugs so much in order to afford these new developments that now we are standing in difficult situation in the healthcare systems. And this is not just a Latvian issue, but around Europe.
To sum up all this conversation, if you look at national systems, what would be, let's say, 3 key steps every country, including Latvia as well, should take to make sure patients always get their medicine?
Yeah. I would say first and foremost, make sure that you nurture your critical infrastructure. So for example, distribution in a smaller country like Latvia, they're absolutely crucial for making sure you always have the medication in your pharmacies, delivering from 1,000 different manufacturers every day, hundreds of thousands of packs to your 700-800 pharmacies around the country. Secondly, understand what it means to have critical infrastructure, to understand the cost structure, what it actually costs to have drivers going out to those pharmacies every day, and so on and so forth. And then thirdly, I would say, think long-term financial sustainability. Sometimes you can save €1 today, but if it will cost you 3-4 euros down the line, then it's maybe not the best thing to do. So really, from my side, we need to think as a healthcare system how we best and most cost-efficient get our drugs to patients around the country.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for explaining us.
Thank you very much for
and
the
visiting us
expertise
this
and
morning.
interview.